I never made it.
G'day viewers, Bucks Gas Garage. Today we've got something a little different. We're just doing an oil change on our family vehicle, which is a 2015 Ford Territory all-wheel drive. It has a 2.7 litre diesel V6, which is derived from Land Rover originally. It was in the Land Rover Discovery and also in the Range Rover Sports as well. Okay, so now we've got our oil and filter. I was originally going to go for the Magnatec Stop Start 5W30, which is recommended for the Territory. The Territory sump holds 5.9 litres, so it's best to get a 6 litre pack if you can. The store I went to didn't have any Magnatec in stock. Penrite is probably a little bit better quality oil, I would say. It's quite expensive. And it has the extra 10 full zinc, so it's actually a 5W30 but with the extra 10, so the correct oil for a Ford Territory. As you can see here, I've got the tools required to do the oil change. One is a 32mm socket, which is for undoing the top of the oil filter. The oil filter is actually the cartridge type oil filter, not a spin-on one. And also you'll see I've got a 13mm spanner there for undoing the sump plug. The sump plug can't be undone with the socket because there's not enough room, which I'll show you in future. And also we have the drain pan. Make sure you've got at least 8 litres capacity in your drain pan. The next thing I want to show you is the service book. Now, a lot of people think that the information isn't in the service book, but it actually is. When you turn to the services, there's no information, but if you go to the start of the book in the Ford Territory, you will see this is the SZ Mark II warranty and service guide. You'll see that all the fluids are there required for it, capacities and so on, but also all your belts, and then also what you need to look at for each service. Basically, there isn't a major service on this Territory until about 165,000 kilometres when the timing belt has to be done, which is probably a little bit more involved than your general backyard sort of mechanic would handle. As we can see here, this service that I'm doing on it at the moment, the previous services have all been done under warranty at Ford dealers, but I was a little disappointed with the service cost being $660 basically to change the oil and brake fluid. So next service was marked at 83,000 kilometres. It's done just under 82,000, which is not in line with the service book, which is normally every 15,000 for the Territory. So, but once they get to this sort of kilometres, aftermarket warranty with Ford, they drop them back to 10,000 k's, which to me is about the right amount for oil, especially if you're doing stop-start driving like we are. So on with it. I just thought I'd show underneath the position of where the drain plug is. It is actually 90 degrees to the ground, and there's a small hole, as I said, 13mm ring spanner because a socket will not fit. This tends to be a bit messy, so you've got to be careful where your oil pan placement is with the 90 degree sump plug to the ground. As you can see, sometimes it's quite handy to have a rag on hand for oil services and changes, especially with a 90-degree plug like this one, but luckily it looks like I've got the drain pan in the correct position to catch all the oil, so we're not ending up with oil all over the driveway. Okay, next thing to do after draining the oil is remove the engine cover on the Territory. Now, this basically just consists of unscrewing the oil cap that you see here. So take the oil cap off, and then the cover should actually just lift off. So you can see there we're exposing the top of the oil filter in the engine there. So as I said previously, it's a canister mount, and we will undo that now with our 32mm socket. As you can see here, the oil filter is still contained in the top canister. Now, according to a few things, this needs to be prized out, but you'll see there's a spigot on the oil filter there. Now, this needs to be lined up with the spigot that you can see inside there. So that's down inside where the oil filter mounts. That spigot must be lined up, otherwise you will crush the filter and destroy it. As you can see here, I've got the filter. I actually had to give it a fair pull with a pair of pliers on the spigot there. Probably be careful not to break it off. Otherwise you can stick something down the centre of the oil filter. So this is the old oil filter, as you can see here, and now we will open up the new oil filter. As you can see, it comes with a rubber O-ring in the bag there, which actually goes on the cap there to reseal the cap. This one, obviously, we won't be pre-lubricating it because there's no need. It's not a spin-on oil filter or anything. So we'll place the oil filter in now and continue on. As you can see here, I have placed the filter in with the spigot in the hole, as mentioned before. Very important. Some people to say put the oil filter back in the canister and then put it in, but others say no, it's best to seat the filter first. I think seating the filter first, knowing that the spigot is in the correct position, is probably the best idea. So we'll screw the cap back on. You may need a stool or a seat to actually get up high enough to reach it to put the filter in and actually make sure that you're in the correct position. You can see here we're just dropping it down and screw the filter back on, which will tighten up shortly. By this stage, most of your oil should have drained, and we should nearly be ready to put the sump plug in and fill it up with oil. So the next thing you'll notice I've got here is a torque wrench. Now, obviously with plastics on vehicles, plastic oil filter canisters and so on, there's a torque setting of 25 Newton meters on the top of the oil filter there. So seeing I've got a torque wrench, I will do the correct thing and torque the top of the oil filter up to 25 Newton meters, I think it is. Just hear the click then of the torque wrench. Look, not essential. I'm only doing it because I have one. So otherwise just tighten, but obviously not too tight, being plastic. This stage looks like most of the oil's out. A couple of little drips coming out, but it's probably been half an hour to an hour. With a hot engine, that's probably plenty. As I say, this putting this sump plug back in is interesting. As you can see, it's on a 90-degree angle with not much room to get in, as mentioned before. The reason not using a socket and using a ring spanner. Alright, next is to fill her up with oil after we do up this plug. So at this stage we've got the sump plug pulled and the oil cleaned off the dipstick, obviously empty at the moment, and we will fill her up with the Penrite oil. Very thin oil, this Penrite oil, being 5, bit hard pouring it, holding the camera, but you can see how quickly that's going down compared to if you watched the previous videos servicing the Mustang, which is a 15W40, but this is almost like water compared to the honey that goes into the little 289 Mustang. Right, so we've basically put 5.9 litres of oil in it. We'll just pull out the dipstick now. These are quite hard to read compared to the normal old style of sheet metal dipstick, but it is showing on the max line. So next thing is to start it up and make sure we have oil pressure. Right, we'll do the start up now after the oil change, make sure we have oil pressure. No strange noises or tappety noises from the engine. The oil pressure has obviously come up. This car in the centre area there will come up with the low oil pressure warning in the centre there where the range is for economy and so on. It will beep and flash low oil pressure, but everything looks good. All that needs to happen now is basically check for any leaks, but as mentioned, everything's tightened up, covers the back on, check underneath, some plugs all tightened up. Right, so oil change is all done. While we're under the bonnet, might as well check a few other things. One of the first things to check here is what you see is the serpentine belt. Basically here the way to check that is the back side of the belt, which you can see here with the ribs, and it's cracks per inch. As you can see with this one, there are no cracks in the belt. Recently changed. Also last service the air filter was changed, but I've pulled that out and given it a clean. Diesel fuel filter, that was done last service. Usually probably about every 30,000, 40,000 Ks for a diesel filter on one of these, depending on the quality of fuel that you're using. Inhibitor, this was changed last service. As you can see, it's on the full mark with the pink coolant, obviously not green coolant with this engine. Also the battery, it's at 650 cca cold cranking amps. Originally this battery is 700 cold cranking amps, but they do lose a bit of power. It's the original battery from 2015, so it's still got plenty of power to crank over this 2.7 litre V6. A couple of specs on the engine. 140 kilowatts with about 440 newton meters of torque, which works extremely well with the ZF 6-speed gearbox that it's mated to. Excellent changes, good economy, and plenty of power when you need for overtaking. The other thing, this model is an all-wheel drive, which you can see by the badge on the side. Fuel consumption figures we've found are far better than what was quoted originally by Ford on a recent trip over 500 kilometres. It averaged about 7.7 litres per 100. Obviously that's at highway speeds. Around town we're probably more up towards the average around town, which is about 10 litres per 100, which is not bad considering most of the running that this car gets is stop-start running around town. Normally what I'll do after doing the service is tip the old oil back into the container if it uses the full amount. As you can see here on the side there, basically 5 litres, 6 litres, so what's come out of it or what's gone into it is exactly the same that's gone into it. So good sign, not using any oil, and probably wouldn't certainly expect it at this stage at 82,500 kilometres. Another thing I'll do when servicing, check the tyres for wear. One of the little issues with Territories is there can be movement in the front and rear bushes. There can be also wheel alignment issues with the front, but I think as soon as you touch a gutter with any car these days, things get out of alignment. So at the moment I'm just swapping back to front just to make sure on even tyre wear. Also at this stage, while I'm swapping the wheels front to back, is a good chance to check the brake pads and what is left. A little bit hard to see there. Also rotor wear to see if there's any lip on the rotors. At this stage there's not. So a good chance to check any suspension, bushes, any clunks or squeaks you might have heard, which this one doesn't seem to have. It's a good chance to check these items. Front discs are a little bit easier to check and a little bit easier to see the pad thickness on the front discs. There is plenty of meat on the front discs. Rear ones will probably check next service. So, but again, checking all suspension, looking for leaks. Obviously the front diff, CV joints here for the diff, but all very dry, no squeaks, rattles or clunks. These bushes here can be an issue, as with the bushes down here, especially turning full lock, you'll hear a clunk out of these. So just things to keep an eye on. Thanks for watching that episode of Buck's Gas Garage. Hope you learned something there and hope it's some helpful tips there for you. So if you like, subscribe and also hit the like button. See you next time.